I don't remember exactly when it started. But sharing a Netflix account with Vance had become a daily habit I looked forward to every single day. It was like a quiet little ritual between two guys who lived together but always pretended everything was normal. In my head, though, nothing about it felt normal, especially once Vance started climbing into my bed every night without asking. As if the space between our two beds was just some unnecessary detail in this room. "You picked the movie," he said, his voice low and lazy. He reached for my pillow, pulled it over like it was his, and hugged it. I kept my eyes glued to the screen, refusing to look at him for too long. I knew if I did, I wouldn't be able to stop. "Another horror movie?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah. Let us see if you get scared." Vance answered with that half-smile I was starting to hate how much I liked. "I'm not scared," I lied. It was a terrible lie, not because of the movie, but because I was sitting right next to a boy I wasn't supposed to want. And that was scarier than any monster on the screen. The movie started. The pale blue glow from the laptop lit up Vance's face, highlighting his sharp jawline and focused eyes. For a second I forgot the plot entirely and just stared at him, then quickly looked away when I realized what I was doing. "Hey," Vance suddenly spoke up. "Are you staring at me?" My heart skipped a beat. "No," I answered way too fast, and even I could hear how fake it sounded. He let out a soft chuckle but did not say anything else. Still, I felt his gaze linger on me for a few extra seconds before he turned back to the screen. I hated how aware I was of every little thing, like the way his breathing grew quieter when he concentrated, or how his fingers unconsciously tapped along with the soundtrack on the edge of the bed. None of it should have mattered. But to me, those tiny details had become embarrassingly important. The movie reached its climax. A sudden jump scare made me flinch, and before I could stop myself, my hand shot out and grabbed the closest thing, Vance's arm. The air froze for a second. I realized I was gripping him tightly, and I did not let go right away. I did not want to. The feeling was too real, too warm, too good, too dangerous. "You said you weren't scared," Vance said, his voice softer than usual. Not teasing, just observing. I yanked my hand back like I'd been burned. "Just a reflex," I muttered, not daring to look at him. A few seconds of silence passed. Then I felt something touch my hand again, lighter, slower, like it was asking permission. I turned and saw Vance's hand resting on mine. Not holding, just touching. And he did not pull away. "Reflex, huh?" he said quietly, eyes never leaving mine. For the first time, I did not know what to say. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Yeah," I answered, my voice a little hoarse. "Reflex." Vance did not smile or tease. He just gave a small nod and left his hand right there. He did not push further, but he did not pull back either. Neither did I. I stayed still, neither refusing nor admitting anything, letting everything exist in that hazy in-between space we both understood but never spoke about. The movie kept playing, but I wasn't following it anymore. All my attention was on that small point of contact between our hands, on the warmth slowly spreading across my skin, on the feeling that I wasn't alone. And that feeling made me want to hold on tight and run away at the same time. When the movie ended that night, neither of us said a word about what had just happened. Vance simply stood up, stretched like usual, and asked, "Got an early class tomorrow?" "Yeah," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. 8 o'clock. "Cool." He nodded, then went back to his own bed. Everything returned to normal, at least on the surface. But I knew something had changed. A thin line had been touched, not completely broken, but no longer intact. And the worst part was, I did not want to fix it. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my hand still remembering the feel of his, with one terrifying thought looping in my head. If just a touch felt like this, what would happen if I took one more step? The next morning I woke up feeling like I had a dream that was way too real. So real I wasn't sure what was actually true and what my brain had made up. But when I rolled over and saw Vance standing in front of the mirror, pulling a hoodie over his head, his bare back exposed for a brief second, I knew none of it had been a dream. Everything was real, including the leftover feeling from last night. That touch, that look, and the silence afterward. It was all still hanging between us, unnamed, but impossible to pretend had never happened. "You're up?" Vance asked without turning around, as if he already knew I was watching. I quickly looked away. Yeah, I replied, voice rough. What time is it? 7:30, he said, pulling his hoodie down and finally turning to face me. His eyes were so normal it confused me, like nothing had happened last night, like I was the only one still carrying it around in my head. You look tired, he added, stepping closer. Before I could react, his hand lightly touched my forehead. The gesture was so natural, so intimate, it froze me for a second. No fever, he muttered. Must V stayed up too late. I brushed his hand away, a little harder than necessary. I'm fine, I said quickly. Vance paused, his eyes scanning me like he was trying to read something, then just nodded. All right, if you say so. He turned away, and the air between us felt different, not obvious, but enough for me to notice the new distance that had formed. And I hated it. I hated that I was the one creating it. But I did not know what else to do. If I did not keep the distance, I would cross the line. And once I crossed it, I wasn't sure I could ever come back. All day I tried to avoid Vance as much as possible. I stayed in class longer than usual, ate lunch alone, even hid in the library until late just to delay going back to our room, back to him, back to everything I was trying to dodge. But eventually I had to return. When I opened the door, the lights were already on. Vance was sitting on his bed with his laptop open. Where V you been all day? He asked without looking up right away, but there was something off in his voice. Library, I said, dropping my bag. Yeah. He nodded, stayed quiet for a moment, then added, I thought we finished the movie from last night tonight. My heart stopped. I did not answer immediately, just stood there. If you're busy, it's fine, he continued, finally looking up. His gaze was direct, no dodging. And that was exactly what made me uncomfortable, not because he was wrong, but because he was acting so normal while I was anything but. No, I'm not busy, I finally gave in, because I knew I did not actually want to avoid him. I was only scared of myself. Vance smiled small, not too obvious, but enough to make something in my chest loosen. Good, he said. Come here. This time, when he patted the empty spot beside him, I did not hesitate long. I walked over and sat down. The distance between us disappeared again, like the morning had never happened, like it was just a temporary glitch. The movie continued, but neither of us was really paying attention. I could feel Vance's focus wasn't fully on the screen, and I knew mine wasn't either. A thin tension hung in the air, not uncomfortable, but full of anticipation. Gannon, Vance said, voice low. Yeah. I turned to him. He looked at me for a few seconds like he was weighing something, then asked, yesterday, were you avoiding me? The question was so direct I wasn't prepared. No, I answered on reflex. You're a terrible liar, he said, not angry, just certain. I let out a dry laugh. I was just tired. Yeah, Vance nodded, but his eyes stayed on me. Not that kind of tired. I stayed silent because he was right, and I hated how easily he could see through me. A few seconds passed. Vance sighed softly and turned back to the screen, as if deciding not to push me anymore. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine, he said, voice back to normal. But that very normalness made me feel worse, because I knew I was pushing him away, bit by bit, just because I wasn't brave enough to face my own feelings. Before I could overthink it, I spoke. Last night. Vance stopped and turned to me. Yeah. I swallowed hard, heart racing. Last night. It was just a reflex, I repeated, like saying it enough times would make it true. Vance looked at me for a long time, then gave a small smile. But this time there was no amusement in it. Yeah, he said. I know. And for some reason, that answer made me feel like I'd just lost something small, but enough to leave an uncomfortable emptiness inside. We did not talk about it anymore. The movie played to the end, and neither of us really remembered what it was about. When Vance stood up to go to bed, I suddenly felt panicked, like if I did not do something right then, the distance would become real, no longer temporary. Vance, I called. He stopped and turned back. What? I opened my mouth, then did not know what to say. Everything I wanted to say was stuck in my throat, too real, too dangerous, too capable of breaking everything. Nothing, I finally said, and immediately hated myself for it. Vance looked at me one more second, then nodded lightly. Yeah. He turned, climbed into his bed, and faced the wall. For the first time, The space between our two beds in this room felt enormous. I lay there staring at the ceiling and realized something I'd been avoiding from the start. I wasn't just scared of liking Vance. I was scared that he might like me back, because if that was true, I would have no reason left to hide. That night felt longer than usual. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because I did not dare to. It was like the second I closed my eyes, everything I was trying to keep balanced would collapse and I'd lose control. I lay still, listening to every small sound in the room. The ceiling fan spinning evenly, distant cars outside the window, and Vance's breathing on the other bed slow, steady, peaceful. It made me want to move closer and run away at the same time. I rolled over, turning my back to him, then rolled back again like an idiot who did not know what he was looking for. Finally I sighed, pulled the blanket higher, and told myself everything would be fine in the morning. I just needed to keep the distance, keep everything at the friends level. That was the safest, simplest, most correct thing to do. I almost believed it, until my phone vibrated softly on the bedside table. I reached for it. The screen lit up in the dark with a Netflix notification. New login detected. I frowned, opened it, and immediately realized Vance was using my account right now. I turned and saw the faint blue glow from his laptop lighting up the wall. He still wasn't asleep. I hesitated for a second, then sat up. "You're not sleeping?" I asked quietly. Vance startled slightly and turned to me. "Yeah." "I couldn't sleep," he said, voice low, like he did not want to break the quiet. I looked at him for a few seconds, then got out of bed and walked over without thinking too much, just following whatever was pulling inside my chest. "What are you watching?" I asked, sitting on the edge of his bed. Vance shifted over a little to make space. "Not sure, just browsing," he said, eyes still on the screen. I looked over. A list of movies appeared, every genre, but nothing was selected, like he wasn't really interested in anything. "You couldn't sleep either?" he asked, not looking at me. "Yeah," I answered simply. No need for more explanation. A few seconds of silence passed. Then he suddenly closed the laptop. The room sank into deeper darkness, lit only by the dim hallway light slipping through the door crack. "Then let us talk," he said, turning to me. The space between us now was much closer than when we watched movies. I could see his eyes clearly in the dark, not their exact color, but very focused, very real. "Talk about what?" I asked, trying to sound normal. "Anything," Vance shrugged. "I don't want to sleep alone right now." That sentence was simple, but it made my chest tighten. Not because of the obvious meaning, but because of how he said it, straightforward, unguarded, like he was letting me into a space he normally kept closed. I swallowed. "Yeah." "Then tell me about you," I said, trying to steer the conversation. Vance gave a small laugh. "There's nothing to tell about me." "There is," I replied. "You always have something, you just don't say it." He stayed quiet for a moment, thinking, then sighed and leaned back against the wall. "I'm not good at this," he said, voice lower and slower. "Opening up." I nodded lightly. "Me neither." Another silence, but this one wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like two people standing in front of a door, neither daring to open it yet, but both knowing it was there. "My family. Isn't the type you can talk to easily," Vance began. "My dad is traditional, you know? Everything has to be in the right box, the right standard. No room for anything off script." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it clearly in the dark. "I grew up feeling like I had to become the version he wanted," he continued, "instead of who I actually am." My heart sank a little, because I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. "So what are you doing here?" I asked softly. Vance gave a small, joyless laugh. "Hiding," he said bluntly. "At least for now." I did not know what to say. I just looked at him, and in that moment I saw Vance not as the calm, always in control roommate, but as someone trying to find his own place, just like me. "What about you?" he asked suddenly. "Your family?" I froze. That question hit exactly the spot I always avoided. "Normal," I said too quickly. "Liar again," Vance said gently, but firmly enough that I couldn't pretend anymore. I exhaled, looking down at my hands. "I have never told them that. I like guys." The words left my mouth and the air felt a little heavier. I did not dare look at Vance, unsure how he would react. A few seconds passed. Nothing sudden happened. No change in distance. Just a hand touching mine lightly. This time it wasn't accidental, wasn't a reflex. It was deliberate, slow, certain. I looked up. Vance was watching me, not shocked, not avoiding, just looking. Yeah, he said simply, like it was the most normal thing in the world. And that made my throat tighten. What do you mean, yeah? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Vance shrugged lightly, but his hand stayed on mine. Yeah means, I get it. And I don't see any problem with it. My heart pounded not from surprise, but from relief. A kind of relief I hadn't known I needed so badly. You don't think it's weird? I asked, almost whispering. He shook his head. No. Then he paused, choosing his words. If anything else weird. It's probably that you think it's weird. I let out a soft laugh I couldn't hold back. And for the first time that day, I felt like I could breathe a little easier. Our hands stayed touching, and this time, neither of us pulled away. Neither of us called it a reflex anymore. It was just a small truth, but enough to change everything. And in that moment I realized maybe, just maybe, I did not need to run from my feelings anymore. At least not when I was with Vance.